There's a very common way of making fun of minimalists, and that is to say that minimalists are
being so rich that you can afford to live like a poor person.
I think the truth is very often the opposite of this cliché. Minimalists tend to be poor people who want to pretend that they are rich. There are two big figures in minimalism. One of them is mandel, who is a video maker who makes very beautiful videos about minimalism, and he promotes this idea. And he got his inspiration and he started to get into minimalism by following some bloggers years ago, including Leo Babauta, who I followed myself 8 years ago. And one interesting fact about these two big figures of minimalism is that they both got into it when they were in a crippling debt.
I graduated shortly after the global financial crisis in 2010. I moved back home to live in my parents' basement with $97,000 in student loans. And I looked at my life and I felt like a failure because I didn't have all the things I thought I was supposed to have. The luxury car, the house, the tech gadgets that everybody seemed to have. And it took finding these blogs. I started reading Leo, Josh Ryan, and a bunch of other minimalists, and I started to think differently about my values.
And the same goes for Leo Babauta. He started to get into minimalism when he was in a big debt. So right off the bat, with these two big figures of minimalism, it seems like it's not so much about like the big Prince Gautama Buddha leaving his palace to stop living the rich man's life and just meeting poor people and eat nothing and be naked or something. It seems like minimalists are just guys who want to pay their debts.
De Duitse minister van Binnenlandse Zaken zegt een Gewaltprediger, dus iemand die geweld preekt.
The Belgian author Ernest mandel talked about this phase of capitalism that we live in. It's called late capitalism. After the first stage, which is like pure competition, the second stage, which is about imperialism, comes the third and falling stage of capitalism. In this specific part, profit margins are getting thinner and thinner. And so the worker, they have to be more flexible. They have to be able to move around to find a job, and they have to accept not working from time to time. So both of these things are much easier if you don't carry too much things around and if you're not used to a very luxurious lifestyle. Lana Blakely, another famous minimalist YouTuber, discovered minimalism not because she was in debt or something, but just because she was traveling around and felt like she was carrying
way too much stuff
and clothes around. And another world-famous minimalist designer, Fumio Sasaki, got into minimalism because he was living in such a teeny place that he had to get rid of all his stuff. When you have to move to a mega city to find a job and survive, you're kind of forced to become a hardcore minimalist. So it really seems like minimalism is really an individual response to a global economic recession and to an economy of debt. But is it really the best path toward individual freedom? Couldn't we just live in bigger places in the countryside? Or couldn't we just cancel our debts? In his book Debt, the First 5,000 Years, the late author and anthropologist David Graeber tells us that debt in old languages used to be the same things as sin.
In Aramaic, the word for debt and sin is also the same word. Actually, the Lord's Prayer, which we always remember through the Anglican translation, which is, forgive us our trespasses just as we forgive those who trespass against us. Translated into this odd private property terms. But the original Aramaic and the original John Wycliffe translation is debt. Forgive us our debts just as we forgive those who owe us money. But of course there's kind of a message there, right? Because we don't actually forgive those who owe us money, generally speaking. So in a way, it's a way of saying, like, you're a sinner.
So individual minimalism is great, but what about collective minimalism?
That's important, so I'm gonna say that again. I didn't see that money that I was making as mine. It wasn't my money, it was the bank's money. I was in the hole.
You're stuck. The farmers fall terribly into debt. As a result, people start taking away their flocks, taking away their fields, taking away members of their family. Debt peonage becomes a huge phenomena. They start running away, joining nomad bands outside the city. Society seems to be breaking down. So kings will normally come in and sort of declare a clean slate. All right, commercial debts can stay on the books usually, but consumer debt will wipe them out and start over again. This becomes a habit and becomes systematized in the biblical Jubilee every 7 to 49 years, depending on your reading. Debts are wiped out, everybody gets to go home. In fact, the first recorded word for freedom in any human language is the Sumerian word amargi, which literally means return to mother, because that's what happens. They declare debt cancellation, all the debt peons get to go home.
But minimalism is really not just about things or money. When people think about minimalism, they will think about traditional Japanese architecture or about empty spaces in old Chinese paintings. But really minimalism is not so much about East Asia. Visual minimalism historically has much more to do with industrial Germany and the Bauhaus movement. Bauhaus started in Berlin as a movement which attempted to unify the principle of mass production with individual artistic vision and strove to combine aesthetics with everyday functions. So, of course, the Nazis, they thought it was degenerate art. And they believed that it was under the Jewish cosmopolitan influence or something. So basically the Bauhaus movement had to leave Germany and they spread all around the world, including in the new Bauhaus of Chicago. The motto of the minimalist philosophy actually comes from one of these artists who moved to Chicago, Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. He translated in English the German proverb, weniger ist mehr, which means less is more. So mass production and the desire of the industry to produce cheaper goods forced our product to be simpler aesthetically and to be much easier to use. In the famous book, The Design of Everyday Things, the author Donald Norman says that every product is heading toward flat design. Flat design is a style of interface design emphasizing minimalist use of simple elements, typography, and flat colors. According to Donald Norman, when a new technology appears, it has to be sophisticated and beautiful because you have to convince the customer to buy it. Think about any old car or any old technology for that matter. It was much more sophisticated and beautiful. And the reason for that is that the companies, they had to convince people that these things were valuable. But nowadays, you know what is a car. So you don't want it to be expensive and too complicated for no reason. It can even be cartoonishly simple. Even if you think about the very first videos, they used to consist of actors in theater settings with orchestra music, but nowadays it's just a random guy speaking alone in his room in front of a single camera and just saying how he feels without a script. The very first internet pages were inspired by books and paper magazines, but nowadays it got much more flat. I remember back in the days when I was reading the blog of Leo Babauta, which started this movement of minimalism. I was reading it because it was so different, so unique, because it was just black letters, big black letters, with a white background. And it became the new normal just a few years ago, with a medium blog post. So the world might be round, but it's definitely getting flat. So flat design is not a choice or a deep philosophy. It's just a fatality for every old technology. And the reason flat design is everywhere nowadays is because we only have old technology. The first flying cars will probably look better than a Chevrolet Corvette. And the first time machine will probably be inspired by some old antique mechanical Swiss clock. But we don't have that because we live in a technological stagnation. We only get better websites. The reason for that technological stagnation might be in fundamental physics, because we still have the same quantum mechanics, for example, and it might also be an ideological issue in the Western world. Physicists and Western chauvinists strongly disagree on that one. Our modern economy in this late capitalism phase is not so much about making us buy new technology, it's about convincing us to buy old technology again, that we already know, so it has to be reduced to its core and minimal functions. I do believe that minimalism is not only adapting ourselves to a global recession or to technological stagnation, or just getting into industrial Germany aesthetics. But I do believe that in minimalism there's something more, there's a light in it.
For the record, minimalism is not a cult. It is definitely not a cult. It's not. Please place your right hand on nothing. By order of the local chapter 536 of the Fraternal Order of Minimalist, I now declare you a minimalist. Wait, is that a bracelet?
Oh, this is just a bracelet that my mom gave me.
You can leave. Get out.
Mandel might be making fun of the religious or spiritual aspect of minimalism, but he cannot totally ignore it. In his book Religion and Nothingness, Keiji Nishitani observed that atheism and nihilism are growing in America. People are feeling that their life are meaningless, and that makes them unhappy. There is two ways out of that. So the first way is to pretend that you do believe that there's a big meaning to life and act as if God is telling you what you should do because you believe in a big, irrefutable and unscientific story about the world. That's coping, and that's Jordan Peterson basically. And there's another way out. This way is to just look at this emptiness, look at this inner void inside of you. And instead of trying to fill the void with some fake meaning, just look at this empty space and contemplate it. Just try to resist and fight the urge to create some fake story about your life and about the world. That could be your new meaning, your new big story about life. It's called Chad Zen Buddhism, a philosophy that would not be based on any fake assumption. It sounds hard, and it is, but it's possible. And I believe that in Leo and Matt, in Lana and many others, there is much more in than minimalism than just an adaptation or submission to this late stage capitalism. I believe that we have a common attraction toward emptiness and a desire to stop filling ourselves with unnecessary goals. This kind of inner minimalism is focusing on the void instead of fetishizing the few stuff that we have. The founder of Zen Buddhism, Bodhidharma, said, "Seek nothing because seeking is suffering." In the 60s, your parents, they could travel all around the continent in a van, and after years of traveling, they could still find a job. We can do that because we have to think about our future. We have to think about our debts. In this ever-changing economic system, it's very hard to not have a financial goal. But can't we go from trying to minimize our debts individually to cancelling it collectively? And I believe that in us, modern minimalists, there is a secret longing toward emptiness and pure acceptance and being happy for no reason. Sure, less is more, but there's even more than that. Nothing. So if you like this video, please share it around, watch it with a friend. I would love Matt and Leo and others to see it. So yeah, like the video and have a great day. See you.